Thank you very much, my panel. So I know that many of you are getting ready to catch flight, and we want to keep it as exciting to keep you here. So let's see how we do that job. Uh, I was thinking about this panel because when Z Prime asked me, they gave me 2, 3 options of the different panels, and I chose this one. And when I looked back, I said, wow, why I did that? Because, and then it stuck to me that my personal journey is about this, changing the thinking in the industry. So I was a consultant for 15 years. I worked for industry for 7 years before I co-founded Vrinda. And that was in 2014 when I came out, leaving my high-profile job. The reason I did was I really wanted to make the change happen in the industry. And I was feeling very constrained where I was. I was working with one of the largest management consulting firm, and I always felt that sometimes we are not able to tell the client that you are going to die, change, because we make $100 million contract from them. So that motivation I came and started, and it's a terrific journey for 8 years. My panelists are already kind of leaders. As you know Paul very well, he has made some big stride in the industry as a utility leader about change. And Shaun, who is my co-New Yorker, we both live in the same island of Manhattan, uh, is making the change happen on the ground. So we are going to hear from this panel today just to set the context of, though the topic says changing the thinking of industry, I would love to have this say changing the thinking of stakeholders. Because industry means people think either we are talking about utilities or technology provider, but there are 4 key stakeholders. Number 1 is customer. We all have agreed that customer is the center of the universe. Now we need to work around that. The second is the utility, and I was very critical. I am always critical about utilities, and the reason for that is I spent 30 years working with utilities. I never worked in the utility, and I say that I love you and I want you to change. So that is the second stakeholder. The third is the technology provider, solution provider. Many of them are here. I think that there is a need for change there. And the last one, which is the most key where I think that utilities hide, is the regulator and policymakers. So in this panel, we are going to hear the thoughts about this changing the thinking of at least these 4 stakeholders. So I would like to start with Paul and then Shaun, like, you may like to introduce and share when somebody says changing the thinking of the industry or stakeholder, what comes to your mind?
Well, thinking of it, so I think one of the interesting things right now that if you work in the electric industry, this is a very, very exciting time. This is my 41st year with the industry, and I think the last 5 years is only time my kids are actually interested in what dad is doing. So that's the first thing. So I think when you talk about change, it really, I think, there's a couple of things that's driving the change in the electric industry. I think the first and foremost, I think the whole world is trying to address the climate crisis, so that you have now the whole world aligning to say what are the steps that you need to do to address climate crisis. And when you look at the utility, we're dead in the center of actually affecting people's lives every single day, integrating renewables, and doing our part to try to change not just the power sector, but really also the transportation and the building sector. But I think when you talk about change in industry, I think we were talking a little bit yesterday before the panel. It's kind of the change has started at the top. And so, I'm very fortunate that I have a very, very forward-leading and, a board that really cares about its community because elected officials, that they actually took the time to actually talk to our constituents and our community about what needs to change. And we heard it loud and clear. They were very, very, very appreciative of the board actually changing its mission and vision for utility. So you talk about changing the mindset. So they changed to, in the past that we're electric utility, we always give, safe, reliable power, right? And then, where you want to talk about environmental leadership, but that's kind of just part of our DNA. But then when the climate crisis hit, when you talk to our constituents, our cities and the county, they said, you know what? The climate crisis is here and is real. And SMUD, being an anchor institution in Sacramento, we're changing our mission. We want to improve the quality of life for our community that we live on. The sole reason for our existence, our board really stated, open statements, that that's really why we're here. If we don't improve the quality of life for our community, there's no reason for us to exist. And in fact, they went one step further. They said, you know, we're not only changing our mission, we're also changing our vision. Our vision is to be a powerful partner and a trusted partner for inclusive zero carbon economy. So we can no longer, you know, just think about, you know, our customer as our ratepayers. We have to think about our customers and our community as a partner. I think you hear the theme here, you know, this whole conference is really about, we can't do it by ourselves. Utility can't do it by ourselves. We have to radically change the paradigm that how we look at our customers. Because our customers moving forward with buying electric vehicles, putting solars in, right? They're doing things, you know, that they can do right now, you know, for a lot of them, to how do you address climate change issues. But you heard the panel this morning, Angie, when you actually do the customer segmentation, the challenges for low income and underserved communities is very different, right? And so, you know, how do you actually making sure that when you go through this energy transition, you're doing it equitably? So, and I love your comment this morning about really, you know, when you're about changing this relationship, all the stakeholders, you not only just have the utility itself, you have the customers, you have the city and the counties, you have the regulators. Now, our board of directors, you know, 3 of them here today, I mean, it's only one part of it. Now, you also have the city and the state and the federal regulators that we're part of the regulated industry. So how do you actually engage them, you know, to be a partner itself? And then you also talked about, well, how do you actually engage the, you know, the private industry, right? So you heard this morning about innovation. So the reason why our board actually put forth this big, audacious goal, I mean, John talked about this morning, right? We have set, I think, one of the most aggressive goal of any large utility in the US. We're committed to go to absolute zero by 2030. Currently, right now, our plants emit about 2 million metric tons of carbon, and we want to go to zero by 2030. And we actually have a follow-up plan for those who are interested, how we're going to get there. And on top of that, one of the things that we said we're going to look at too is really looking at how do you making sure that you do it equitably. So that means how do you actually engage the community. So that's how we're actually looking at it. It's got to be a holistic approach. It's got to be all the stakeholders that you're talking about.
Thanks. So Shaun, I used to come to your boss fighting for change. That's how I got to start working with Con Edison, because Matt Kashke, who's the president now, when he was the SVP of Utility of the Future, I used to come to Matt saying that, why not, we are implementing what the change. And since then, I have seen a lot of change happening. So, and one of the reasons you have taken some special role now to engage with contractors and communities is like a real kind of change in Con Ed. So just like to hear about that from you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for sitting in here today, and Paul and Navneet. Very good panels to be on stage with. A little bit of stage fright today, so had a late night. Interesting note, I always see Navneet out of New York City. I've never met him in New York City yet, all right? So when asked to be on this panel, I absolutely had to join him on this stage and make sure that we do connect when we're back home. Systems over time are resistant to change, right? I think we could all agree with that. And I think that a lot of people have the perception that the grid has been slow to change. But when you think about it, all of the systems, our energy systems, whether it's for electricity, transportation, heating, they were very siloed, and over time now they've come together, right? We're able to provide customers, whether it's residential, whether it's commercial, one set of service offerings that you could get your energy from. I'm gonna share a story about adaptive leadership. The gentleman on the last panel said leadership was one of the key fundamentals for what needs to happen. And there are adaptive challenges and technical issues that are clearly need to be defined. And this story I'm gonna share is about Marty and his 95-year-old mother. His 95-year-old mother still drives, very independent, lives by herself. Marty lives about 4 hours away. So when he drives up to town to see her, they have dinner dates. She drives independently on her own. She even drives at night sometimes. And over time, Marty starts seeing scratches on her car, more and more scratches over time. Now, there's an easy fix to this. The technical issue, take it to a body shop, get it fixed. But the underlying issue is the adaptive challenge that needs to be addressed. So how do you do that, right? Marty's mother is 95. She boasts about being able to drive, maybe the only one out of her friends that drives and drives at night nonetheless. There's a sense of pride in that, right? And that resistance to change. She would have to take the technical solution, call an Uber, maybe ask a friend to pick her up. But the adaptive challenge is what is she losing by giving up that independence, right? That pride that she has in driving. And that's kind of what we need to be faced with in our industry. So as it relates to the market, contractors, distributors, our service providers, these are some legacy companies, industries that have historically been very successful in managing the business the way that they have. And as a utility partner, we have to be neutral, right? We can't favor any specific vendor, contractor, regardless of how well they perform. So what I've been able to start to think through is how do we implement standardized, objective performance metrics where if the market is performing well, right, they all have the opportunity to achieve a new level through these metrics, then they could be rewarded, right? And that allows me to remain neutral, right, because I'm not favoring one over the other. They're actually just achieving these different targets, which unlocks a lot of the potential for the business that they could provide to our customers because, quite frankly, they engage with our customers more than we do at the utility. They're in their homes, they're in their facilities. They're offering them solutions on behalf of the utility, but we have to make sure that that messaging is clear and that our objectives are aligned, right? So the adaptive challenge is how do we help them make that change and not have that sense of pride to say, you know, this has worked for several years, right? This is how our industry is operated, and this is how it's going to continue to be.
Yeah, so you kind of already divvy up into the contractors or the third parties. So we'll start with that. And the reason I don't want to discuss because you both are from utilities, and my strong belief is if it was 5 years ago, I would have said that utilities, you need to start changing. But this is like an elephant which has kind of started moving. You know, it had an inertia, but like now you see every utility is on move. So utility is doing their part in my view. Means you can disagree that they are not doing all of them at the same level, but utilities have moved. I think I want to challenge and hear your thoughts when it comes to contractors, you know, technology providers, what change we need. And the reason I came passionately in this, because I felt that everybody was bombarding utilities and utilities were saying, oh, we are slow to change this, that. I said, no, you put them on spot. For example, I work with a lot of technology providers and say, what's your business model? And the guy says, oh, I love business model. I said, what's your business model? He says, I would love to make a business model. So the thing is, from a technology provider's point of view, what has been seen, that they are still looking for same contract from you, that you pay me full money, guarantee the payment, I don't want to put my skin in the game, and it applies to the VCs who are funding these startups. So the thing is, we need to change their thinking. If you want innovation, for example, you bring a new technology in front of a utility, your company has not existed for even 5 years, you are asking the utilities to buy it for 40 years. How that is possible? What's the model in which utility and ratepayers are protected? So, Paul, I would like to hear, I know that you may not like to say like very directly, but I would like to hear from you like what you want from the industry to change.
So I think this is a paradigm shift, right? Just like the utilities traditionally are very risk averse because we have all the rules and regulations, and just like the VCs, when you have VC capital funding in, they have all their rules and regulations they got to follow. So I think really is that we really need to actually bring the industry, the technology folks together to say, here's a problem I'm trying to solve, right? What is the best ways for us to solve this problem? And develop strategic partnerships so that you actually have skin in the game. So both of us, if we both succeed, widely successful, we both gain. And if we fail, we both fail. So I think this is one of the interesting things that we actually have approached our board to even change some of our strict directives to allow us now to have strategic partnerships, that we actually having joint ventures with private industry, which traditionally we do not do as a publicly owned utility. But we actually have successfully kind of change our policies and guidelines and really make it easier for some of the smaller companies that maybe it's not as proven that, you talked about in the earlier panels that, sometimes our purchasing, and supply chain is quite restrictive. So we need to understand when you're working with some of the smaller companies or some of the technology companies, what are really some of those barriers that we need to actually help them solve their barriers. At the same time, they're helping us, solve ours. So this is really about that collaboration that we're talking about. But it's actually more than just collaboration. It's really about taking concrete steps to develop partnerships, MOUs, and share savings and share risk.
Great. So, Shaun, I want to, because you are one part of your job you describe is to develop the contractor networks and relationship, the trade ally. And very recently, working in New York, we have very interesting experience. So I work on a heat pump program for Long Island, and contractors have burned the whole budget because somehow the incentives were covering 97% cost. So the funny part was the Con Ed had to stop their program in May because of the same problem, but LIPA didn't know it. So all the contractors, because if you know geographically, Long Island and Con Ed, New York City is side by side, so same contractor moved other side, and they did the exact same thing. So the thing is, we are all kind of for empowering the contractors, but like the contractor communities is not looking that way. They just like, okay, you're giving me, I'm not telling you that this is like too much kind of incentive, it's not going to, So what is your kind of view on the contractor side? Like what you look from in terms of?
Yeah, thank you for teeing up it's a Clean Heat program, which is a statewide program that's geared towards incentivizing heat pump technologies so that we could electrify heating loads, whether it's for space heating or domestic hot water in New York City and New York State overall. So that program, we just, we had to pause it. So we like to say that we hit our 2025 goal in February of last year, right? Which to anyone would tip their hat. But with that achievement also went our budget, right? So we exhausted the entire budget. And we had to file a petition for additional funding to the Public Service Commission. So kind of the same way we are investor-owned, but we're also a regulated utility, which put a pause on the growth of that market, which is not good for business, right? We got all of our customers excited. We got manufacturers, distributors, contractors on board, and then we ran out of money. So lots of lessons learned there. We could have done a better job of communicating that to Long Island so that the same mistake wasn't made. I think California ran into similar sort of exhaustion of funds, as well as Colorado, I believe. So there's something to be said about the bigger markets and how we can mitigate this risk. Now, we did also see this when we launched lighting about a decade ago. Contractors were installing light bulbs in closets, in crawl spaces, in attics, in places where they weren't really used and claiming savings. So we could have had some lessons learned there. What we're doing now is we have moved away from capacity-based incentives, so now it's per dwelling unit or per home or facility that's electrified, and really holding them accountable, right? We have to make sure that, that they're good partners, right? We reward them for innovation. And we relaunched the program January 17th of this year. Haven't seen much uptake yet, but we are providing them with more resources now. So I just launched a clean heat financing program to help fill in the gap between the incentives and the upfront cost of capital to our customers through various channels of leasing agreements. So that's one thing that I'm helping out the PC network with and educating them, right? Holding focus groups, roundtables, working with the manufacturers to see exactly what the right price point should be for the technologies, and then rewarding those that are incorporating low global warming potential refrigerants as a solution for our decarbonization needs. But it has to be a two-way conversation. We have to hold them accountable, and we have to hold ourselves accountable for making sure that we have good actors in the market.
Right. So I think we all know that I'm not trying to criticize contractors. They are good and bad. The point is not that. I think that relationship and the partnership, that knowing, I have this goal to achieve and how we can work together to achieve it, rather than you just repeat me and you met my 2025 goal by just burning my money. That's not the thing. But I think in this context, there is another barrier or like a stakeholder which need changing is the regulator. Because most part, the regulator says to utilities, your role is to give these incentives. Your role is to do, but your role is not beyond this point. So clearly, Paul, I will start with you that there are some regulatory barriers also, that regulatory side, the thinking need to change. And it's a very difficult, like nobody wants to say to the regulator that you need to change, but I go to like very other countries also in the conference, and they said, oh, what regulator, how? I said, you know what? The regulator is a guy, he is just there in the other side. That doesn't mean that he is more intelligent than you. In fact, your utilities, you know better. Maybe you should do something and go and tell him that this works. Can you write a regulation now? So I can say these things because I am like not a utility, but the, the point I'm driving to is that from a regulatory point of view, because a lot of these things like, like Con Ed, you cannot do this, you cannot do this, you cannot do it. Your job is just to hand over these things and then monitor. And like your hands are tied in some sense. You know where the problem is, but you cannot go beyond that. So what kind of things you have seen and what you would like to see the change there?
So actually, SMUD is actually doing that now, and we've been doing for quite a while. So one of the major changes that, you talk about this partnership, and the foundation for any good partnership is trust. And you need to develop trust, just like you develop trust with our community and our customers. You need to actually spend the time to develop trust with the regulators. You really need to understand, it's a regulator's job to provide those safeguards, right, for the industry. So, and then there's also policy objectives the regulator is trying to accomplish. So you really need to actually invest the time to really understand and get to know the regulators. What are they trying to accomplish, right? What is their fear about, when they put all the regulations in place? And then also spending the time to understand and actually, in a way, make them aware and educate them. When they actually change those regulations, what the impact that it has for us, but not just for us, because they know the utilities, but it's really about the impact it has on our customers, both business and industrial customers, right? And how does it, by whatever they're putting in, is it really helping the state's policy objective moving it forward, or is it actually detracting? So people will need to spend, and all of us, I think the industry needs to spend a lot of time instead of seeing the regulators, well, they're regulators, and we'll just go ahead and kind of, I don't want to say fight them on every front, but really give, inputs. I'll criticize one of the things that's not right, but also encourage them when things are going well and how their policy is actually helping. So it's really spending the time to really rethink the relationship, not just look at them as regulators, but really as a partner that we help them to actually advance their policy perspective. And the regulation they put in place is also helping us help them to advance their policy objectives and give them assurance, right, the confidence of safeguarding it and making sure that we with that partnership. And so and it takes time to do that. So I think the utility really need to start thinking about, and not only just our company, right, is you need to bring the partners along. So the other utilities, because there's more power in numbers, but then also bring the folks that usually are not on the same camp as you, like bring, the technology companies, the manufacturers, the EJ communities, right? And even maybe bring your state regulators to go talk to the federal regulators, so that making sure there's alignment along the way.
Shaun,
Yeah, I would just add to that, Paul. Making sure that the policies that are set are all driving us in the right direction, right? Because there's a lot of inconsistency there. Like the grid is connected, but the policies are not necessarily connected. And that could lead to a lot of unintended consequences. Like we just decommissioned a nuclear power plant. And as we're phasing out gas now, we're starting to see that over time, the emissions rate were going down, but now they're going back up, right? So the policies are set for net zero, for decarbonization, for electrification, right? And phasing out the gas system, but right now, the emissions factors are increasing, right? So making sure that the policies are all leading us in the same direction. The same thing's happening within the circular economy, right? When you think about they want to implement reusable materials, so they may reintroduce plastic, right, and get rid of paper, right? So it's thinking through what the policy is intended to do, what the intentions are, how to get there, and holistically looking at, how could we come to some sort of alignment?
Jason, we need the regulator next time here. Remember that. So the last part of this stakeholder, which is not the least, is the customer. And one of my belief always was the customers really don't want to know about what you're trying to do. They just want their lights on, right? means they are sensitive, they love the environment and all, but it's not like they are kind of, dying for that to kind of make the change. There may be some of them, but not all of them. But we know that as we are going toward grid edge technologies and more, customer participation is inevitable. So what is the change from a customer point of view we need, and like how to get that? Like, it's a big thing. First of all, customer is not one monolithic kind of thing. It's a low income customers who have no means, to the industrial and informed customers. They are very intelligent people, and everything in between. So what's your thoughts like on the changes on the customer side and how easy or difficult it will be?
Well, I think what it is that, you have to think about the customer very differently. And I absolutely agree with you that customers are homogeneous. The challenges that a low-income customer faces to think about this energy transition is very, very different than some of the higher income. So you really have to, first of all, meet and understand really the challenges on the different segment of customer that you have, but also be willing to engage them where they're at and really understand what the issue is. So if you're talking about the low-income customers, that is actually a worry about putting food on the table, paying the rents. It's very hard to have a conversation about what this energy transition is. So first of all, I think we need to engage the customer in a way they understand what the value proposition is. Why is this clean energy transition important for them? And how it's going to impact their life? But more importantly, are you willing to put the resources available to address those challenges? So for SMUD, for example, we actually did that. So we actually have mapped really all the different disparate communities that we have, from income, demographics, health, air quality. And we're saying that, well, here's the challenges, and if you actually want customer to participate in your program in this transition, what you need to do? And it came up that you need inclusive workforce development. You need inclusive economic development. You need to help me actually, make my community better. So we actually created a community impact plan, and so sustainable, and we're actually putting resources to help those communities, and not only those communities and those customers, but also the organizations that provide the services so that they can actually have the resource to come and give us the input. Because a lot of times, I think you heard Angie talk about this morning, those people that you really want to hear from the most are least able to afford to do that. Right. So therefore, you need to make sure that you're very, very conscientious about providing resources to do that. And so that's really one way we're looking at it, is making sure that we meet customers where they're at, we actually understand what the challenges are, we actively work together to try to solve those challenges, to bring them along and making sure they're part of this transition.
Right. So I will just give like little kind of twist on this customer thing. So how our programs can be off. In New York, we have a program for low-income customers to get financing. Now, if your air conditioning is broken or heat is broken, you have to fill up a form, then it goes to a financier, he will make a decision, and he may give you an answer in 90 days. Now, imagine any of you who lost heat in a cold winter, can you wait for 90 days to get a decision? So that's an example of like how far we are, like when we are not meeting the customer. And low income customers, they don't have even minimum credit score and then so and so forth. So meeting the customer is very important. Shaun, would you like to say something about like how we meet the customer or how customers need to change?
Yeah, I think that I want customers to see themselves as part of the solution, right? And really come to the table with ideas and not really rely as much on industry or even figure it out, help us figure it out. It has to be a partnership and a joint collaborative. Something that I've been dabbling with is how could we create non-conventional coalitions, like working with the faith-based community to see what their needs are? Because everyone goes to church, right? Not everyone, but people that go to church convene, they have different needs, and we can learn a lot from what they're thinking about, right? Or how they're engaging in their community. And really building that trust, we have to leverage trust from organizations that have the trust of those communities. So whether it's community-based organization, business improvement district, whether it's elected officials that have the trust of the community, which is kind of tough to say, right? But we only have 5 seconds, so anyone wants more information on that, we could talk after the panel.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, we are very excited people, so we took all the time here. But in the end, I guess we all realize this, there are many stakeholders, and the change is not like one side, like people say industry means they're thinking utility need to change. I think what we demonstrated here through discussion, there are all other stakeholders. This is a big kind of change management kind of exercise here. And bottom line of all this thing is the business model need to change for everybody. You know, how you make money, whether you're a contractor, whether you're a customer, whether utility, so all have to kind of, you know, come to the table with the open mind. I would like to kind of pause here, and if somebody has any question, but otherwise, you know, we can kind of talk, and if anybody has any last minute thought, Paul or anybody to share.
Well, first of all, does anyone have any questions first?
Yes.
I can't see, we can't see out here.
Yeah. If anybody has any thoughts or questions.
Yeah, it's the last day of the conference. They're ready to go home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So, yeah, if nobody has a question, then if you want to have any closing remark about this.
Yeah, I think the closing thought really is that, you know, when you work, at least from a utility perspective, you know, I think it's really, you know, important that you understand the needs and challenges of your community, or, you know, all the stakeholders that you're talking about, and really investing in the time and money and efforts to build that trust. Because without the trust, you're not going to get the collaboration and the partnership that you're looking for.
You know, I would just say that we're looking for partners. We don't have all the answers, right? We want to lean on your experience and really drive this change collaboratively. That's the only way that we're going to get this together. So
So I thank you very much for this, and thank you all of you.
Thank you.